We will be practicing language justice in this space by providing Spanish and English simultaneous interpretation using the Zoom interpretation feature. Once the interpretation feature is turned on, you will see a globe appearing at the bottom of your screen. You will click on that globe, and from there you will choose your language, Spanish or English. We recommend that unless you're fully bilingual, you choose a language, English or Spanish, to listen to the webinar.
Well, once again, good evening, everyone. It is now 8:08 p.m. where I am located. I'm in the Bronx, also known as Lenape Hokie Land. My name is Luis Alejandro, and I'll be the facilitator for this webinar today. And in my role as a member of the leadership team at Illuminate, I'm very excited to begin this particular webinar for blogs, which is the fourth vlog that we are doing in this series. So I will also remind you that interpretation is available. There is Spanish and English for those of you who need that support. So please, if it's not working for you, let us know in the chat so we can troubleshoot. Great. So now let's get to know our incredible presenters for tonight. They will be giving their own introductions, their own bios. And please, if you have not read their blog, you have to do it. You have to do it right now. You have to do it right now while we are in this webinar. You need to read it. Don't wait. Also, I just wanted to show you who I'm talking about. I'm referring to Alejo Heimo and Natalia Tavera Daza. Hello. So thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Alejo. The agenda for tonight is full of valuable information. And to begin, we are going to be having some icebreakers, some quick activities to energize the group. And after that, we will be taking center stage to present this article. And please make sure that you take notes, that you write down any questions that come up. And after this, we will have a Q&A where you might be able to receive some direct answers from our experts so that we can go deeper into this topic. Then we'll go into breakouts so we can just chat amongst ourselves, and that will be an incredible opportunity to exchange knowledge with your colleagues. And then after that, we will be back here in this room to share in the whole group so we can hear some of the key points that came up in that room, in those breakout rooms. How does that sound, Natalia and Alejo? Good, good, it's perfect. Please introduce us. No, thank you, Luis. Thank you. Thank you for this space. Thank you also to the whole team at Illuminate. And well, we're very happy to see some familiar faces here and others that, you know, haven't turned on their cameras, but I know are here. Also some new faces. And so I hope that it's a rich, constructive space and that this call to critical posturing on this topic leads to just wonderful conversations as already happened this week. Thank you, friend. I add to your excitement at seeing so many familiar faces, just people who see us and who want to read us. I'm speaking here in like the plural because Alejo and I, you know, we share a history of collaboration since 2019 when we met, when we were doing our master's in sustainable tourism at the environmental university. And we had this like amazing academic clique. And since then, we've been able to initiate some collaborations. And this is the first time that we got it together to write something together. And so to us, this is something that we're really happy to share with you this afternoon, evening. And we're going to be talking a little bit about what the process was, what the article is, And then, of course, like with any critical exercise, we'll be opening up the conversation so that all of you can also give us your opinions. So, uh, with that said, we've started, right, Alejo? Yes, yes. I don't know, Luis, if we should give it back to you for the breakout rooms. Okay, give me 1 second. Thank you so much. So, well, I'd like to share with you, just formally while I'm speaking, I wanted to share with you my screen, just so that you can see if anyone is lost, if anyone hasn't read the article, just so that we can see the title that we chose for our collaborative work and to land on what it is that we're going to be discussing. To begin with, as always, those of you who know me or who are getting to know me tonight, I'm a historian. So I always have the obsession of context. You know, from what point are we speaking to you? Why are we speaking to you about sustainable tourism projects that are financed by international cooperation? And this is because Alejo and I were facilitators for some of these processes. And through some conversations that we had, we realized that there is this really interesting problem in Latin America in terms of how international funds are handled. And in conversation with another colleague, we we learned that in Venezuela, the application of international organisms is being restricted from the budget. So everything that has to do with development and sustainable tourism is happening through the state. And here in Mexico, where I'm in Mexico City right now. Alejo is in Argentina, but we work a lot on Mexican tourism issues. Um, and so the Venezuelan woman who I spoke to led me to realize that Mexico has a tendency toward managing these budgets for tourism applications. As you've seen, there's like a lot of presence from Germany, from USA, from all of these international bodies, and there's this tendency of like applying funds to the budget from the government. And this might sound really technical to some of you, but this is a response to budget management. Why is the budget not being given to the private sector? Why does there need to be a public application? So this is something that really drew us in. And it is around this context that we started having these conversations. And I'm going to pass it to Alejo so that you can give us some more specific context. Thank you, Nati. And so within this general context of Latin America as a whole, what we wanted was to place our findings, our discoveries, in terms of three categories that illuminate proposes for this series of blogs that are their equity, systemic change, and collaborative leadership. And so we chose a concrete case study for these different projects that we've participated in firsthand. And that is what is postulated in this article, which is Project Get, which was created with Mano Mono, with the organization that I'm collaborating with, and that Nat also forms a part of. And yes, if we look at this data, we look at the results of that report, the how we took on this article is different because it's more about this perspective, this facilitation, the role that we held at the moment in order to identify all of the strengths that we could see in this process, but also the opportunity zones present in this type of project. And so we'll bring that also to the discussion as we know that there will be, and we want there to be more projects such as this in different territories, but we truly want them to have an impact where that's needed, especially within our discipline, which is ecotourism. And so with this context that we are sharing, so that you can see, you know, where we're talking to you from this role as a facilitator, from people who are inside the project, we didn't form part of the design of these projects. Instead, they come to us as a mission to implement as we were facilitating, or when I was facilitating at Mano al Mono, the organization that Alejo was mentioning, that he still forms part of, and that, um, we're a little bit more, well, further away from facilitation right now, but still a part of this. And so to begin and talk to you about the process of collaborating on this article, I wanted to share a slide with you. It is a little bit technical, um, but really important in order to talk about what these cycles of research look like, and this collaborative methodology, which is so important to us because we are seeing tourism from the perspective of collaboration. So we try to make sense from this point where we relate ourselves as researchers to what you are reading on the Illuminate blog. So what we know, you wanted to write this or show this in a cyclical way because it's work that never ends. It was published last week and we had to stop there. But if we kept going with the feedback, surely this would be an article that would just continue transforming. So what we did was initiate a dialogue, an idea, a process that was, floating around, which was this project in Oaxaca and Chiapas. And we started talking about the results of this project, what we were seeing, which is different than other processes that we participated in, or that we had heard about. And so the first thing we did was ideate, speak, think about how these questions, these guiding questions from Illuminate, could help us dialogue and help us discover something interesting within this process. And once we had the idea built, then we could look at structure. And today, now that I'm studying writing, it's really important not to just start writing whatever first comes to mind, because otherwise it's going to be an endless version. There has to be structure, there has to be planning. What do I want to share and how am I going to share it? And so after that came the whole research phase. We did interviews, we did polls, we looked at biographies, we spoke to old colleagues. And once we had all the information, then we sat down and decided to write. And just like it's writing by four hands. So you're gonna see people who are a little bit more, if you're someone who like really pays attention to tone, you might be able to notice when you're reading Alejo, when you're reading Natalia. But we did manage to create a rounded, a well-rounded text. And I invite you to read it or to listen to it so that you can be a part of this process too. And then finally comes the research, which again incites dialogue and makes us restart this structure. So there are these cycles in this collaborative experience. And the tool that we use is Miro. Many of you might know this strategy. What we did was we parsed the article, and we have a lot of post-its here that are organized by color in clusters. And then after various reflection sessions, in Black, we created, questions that explore where we want the research to go, a mapping of who we want to speak to. And all of this was done in a collaborative way. And that's the emphasis that I wanted to share with you. And so I'm gonna share again the name of, well, the general presentation. But after this whole process, what we wanted to share in this space was our findings. Right? The problem has been very well planted and exposed in the article, but in this space, before we begin talking and dialoguing, what we want is to share our most important conclusions. It's wonderful, Nati. And so let's go with one of the first things, which is looking at tourism from the point of collaboration. And maybe this is, there's something in this paradigm that differs from the paradigm of competing, right? There's so much like from the methodology that we worked with this industry, the perspective was looking at other industries in the destination as collaborators and not competition, and to really seek this identity of paisajes, which is the proposal for the project of even, working within two states, Oaxaca and Chiapas, which maybe at another point were also looked at as competitors. But not only within this methodology with industry, but also at the project level, where we want there to be a lot of values, um, because the program doesn't begin from zero, but just seeing like what actors were already there in terms of production, tourism, and inviting them to dialogue, to invite them to this convening, so that we could begin from, already having like the film or like the previous idea of what other people had done for this process. So a question that really generated curiosity in us, especially toward the end when we were talking about it in one of our polls, when we had one of the women sharing that part of civil society, or maybe the people who don't find themselves located in any of these organizations that are represented in this process, that maybe by lacking the context for this program that we specifically work with, tourism, that there was some damage done to some species that were in conservation spaces. And so the question was, how can we include, and is it relevant to include the participation of civil society when we have these big projects? So that, that idea of civil society is a little up in the air sometimes. Do you want to keep going? Great, thank you. And then another of the points that was very, that led to a lot of discovery was, in general, the the destination gestures as everyone who works with people in the chain of tourism to improve the quality of services, but also in protecting the patrimony. And here we convened uh, people from the public sector who work with the protection of landscapes, because it incorporated different protected areas in both states. And then also the secretaries of tourism, um, who were, had like a specific sustainability department. So there's these types of professionals who are already within these territories, who have their roles, who have their functions, and to, can have this like end of conservation and tourism as their goal. And so we convened them. And then they were also empowered in the idea that, like their active participation was always sought out. In one of the first moments in our gathering, because it's often, the digital gathering through social media. Sometimes we know that the communities, the businesses that are in that area day to day don't necessarily have the access or the time to be in those mediums, or to be taking the time to participate in a digital way. And so, they did this match to see like which industries are already available, to help add to this type of program. And so this is how they were able to help out and participate. But on the other hand, like the third piece of knowledge, the gestionnaires during these practices, uh, wanted to like help review some things that sometimes sound very theoretical. Um, and then again, in how we're going to replicate this, because we worked with different industries, but we want the stewards to also have the tools to work with either industries that didn't exist at the time, or that were not able to join the program originally. Thank you so much, Alejo. Something else, another important conclusion that we drew, and that helped us understand that this project was different from other projects in which we'd participated before, is that there was a shared purpose. Okay, so this rarely happens that the project of international cooperation, which is being applied in the territory, responds or corresponds to the purpose, the goal of the people in the territory. And this is because these projects are usually not designed in a participatory way. They're designed and then they're implemented and people add themselves to it. So a particularity that we found is that the project was focused on conservation, the conservation of certain species. And I'm going to share some more later on. And the communities that were doing tourism in Oaxaca-Chiapas coast also had an interest in conservation. And so there is like an important piece of alignment that allowed the project to flow, overcoming the initial challenges of the convening. Like we were able to like speak a common language because everything was turning around this idea, this notion of conservation. In this sense, it's also very aligned. Oh, we're still looking at this empowerment slide. Oh, okay, let me see if I don't know if my internet is just a little bit slow. I think it changed now. Okay, yes, this is the corresponding slide. Okay, so yeah, this is about the goal of the tourism, the objective of tourism. So this was very aligned with what was previously said. Like we could see that the objective of the project coincided with the community's objectives. And so we also understood, it was also understood that tourism was not the endpoint that we wanted to reach. The communities and the stewards of tourism, such as like the administrator of the Department of Conservation, the environment, all of us who were representing at the time La Mano del Mono, we utilized tourism as a means. Okay, it functions as a tool that can conserve a territory, that can spark a conversation about environmental education, about women's rights, but it is not the plan. Okay, the territory does not exist for tourism or to depend on tourism. Why? Because there are things that happen with dependent economies and societies. This is a clear example of what's happening in Oaxaca right now, in the capital of Oaxaca, where there is an anti-tourist movement because gentrification has put into peril the local community. And this is because planning for tourism is the end all be all. And it has been forgotten that the territory is for the people and everything is planned for tourists. And so this is something that I really wanted to take away from the text, because be it traditional tourism, adventure tourism, ecotourism, if it is used as a means, then it can bring benefits and it can bring abundance, economic abundance. But if it is used as an end, it will deteriorate the territory. And I've already moved on to the next conclusion, Alejo. When you can change the slide, you can do that. Okay, it's still not on. Here we go. And so then another one of our findings that we above all like found in these polls, because we wanted to, not have it just be like the facilitator talking about facilitation, but to truly have many voices, many opinions to be able to come to a conclusion like this. We identified this idea that it generates a bridge between the program's goals and perhaps the personal or business goals of the participants. Because it's a little bit what Nat was sharing. If there was a common goal, which was conservation and having tourism be a way of life, sometimes the language between, maybe the spheres of design and financing and impact that we've mentioned on other levels is is not something that resonates or makes sense to the communities. And so being able to bridge between these things and being able to say, well, at the end, what we want is the same, and many times like facilitation and just listening and being able to align these goals is a very important part of the process. And then something else that we saw in this role and that gave a lot of value is that it was being passed from transference to creating spaces of dialogue, spaces of conversation where the issues were truly brought in, you know, from so-called knowledge. But then what was actually learned or the group findings really came from this exchange and this dialogue and not from a transfer of knowledge. And so something else that was really interesting is that there were diverse voices. It wasn't just one or two facilitators. We had a group of up to six, and there was a lot of female presence, which is something that, again, goes back to the axis of equity. But, there was just a space where women could show that they were the ones opening these conversations, leading these spaces, and that also invited other women to add themselves to the space. In fact, we started the project with a certain number and it just kept growing. Every time that industries went back home, they would bring more women to the next session. And then again, the idea of the facilitator's role or involvement, where often we're staying like at one level, we're saying like, well, okay, we're moving forward this project, but we were able to deepen human relationships with the participants instead of just saying it was a business or a case study, right? As one of the stewards mentioned, it really led to different results. Yes, and in this sense, you're going to find often in the text that we really reiterate the humanization of tourism because we want to understand that we are people. We are people, we are humans, and we are working together as people for a territory, whether we're from there or not. And maybe it sounds like very simplistic rationale, very basic, but when we're in the field and when we're really pressured by the constraints of a project, sometimes we forget the human relationships are what are going to determine whether a project is successful or not. So going back to what Alejo said about women's participation, it's something really interesting because the project had that as an indicator. It wanted 50% of its participants to be women identified or female identified participants as something that was indicated. But in tourism, we say, or it's said, and more on Women's Day, which is something that drives me crazy, is that there's these infographics and metrics that show that this is a sector where women participate the most, and there's so many women in this industry, women here and women there. But when you start actually analyzing the metrics, you see that women are not in the leadership roles. They're not in decision-making roles. And yeah, they're not directors, they're not secretaries of tourism. And so, okay, yeah, there's a lot of women who are obeying the decisions that men have made. So being able to see the dynamics in the case of sustainable projects changed. In the beginning, we had participation from women, but they were women who felt intimidated, who didn't want to participate, who didn't feel that they could contribute. But as we participated, women as facilitators, the facilitation team was very, very well trained in terms of collaboration and on gender issues. And we managed to get a lot of other women to participate. And this started generating a very different dialogue in the sessions that we had. So the quote that we chose is for a cooperative of rural tourism in Mexico. Having a woman be president of that is not common. It's not something that can be found. And so that's why that's something that we highlighted. I'm sorry, what? We can't see the quote. It's not on the screen. Oh, you can't see it? No, 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 it's not there yet, sorry. You'll have to go into the text to be able to see the quote. Um, but another woman who is like occupying an interesting role that I wanted to share is a woman who wanted to give her certification as a nature guide, which in our urban eyes or in our eyes from other places, we're like, well, whatever, anyone can be a nature guide, right? But no, in a community, in a conservative community, women occupy caregiver roles. And if they are involved in tourism, it is to perpetuate those caregiving roles, to be in the kitchen, to receive guests, to make the beds. So seeing a woman be a nature guide with her harness, with her ropes, it is a woman who had to save money, right? Because the community did not support her, but she decided that she was going to prove herself and return to her community as a hero, as an example to other people that these decisions can be made with respect to the future and to the jobs that a woman decides to do. And so these are really small exercises, really small examples, but they show us so much based on just the simple facilitate participation in one session and what sort of process that can ripple into in communities, especially in women. No, can you show the next slide? No? Okay. I think we have to reshare the screen maybe. Maybe that would be helpful. I don't know why it's so slow. Is that good? Well, okay. Well, just to close out this because we talked a lot, the conclusions. So the communities of practice, and the first time that I heard this term, I didn't really understand the concept. And the first time that we tried to implement it, um, it also just cost me a lot of struggle. But for this project, I think it was something transcendental in terms of um, in general, there's been different communities of practice, some more organic, some more directed um, that allow after implementation for there to continue being, you know, from enthusiasm, from that day to day, from those like continuing to meet to share doubts. And so, two examples that are really interesting are on one side, the group of stewards of managers that we talked about who shared that if they, you know, they have similar roles in different areas of protected territory or from the Secretary of Tourism, that they didn't have these spaces of, oh, hey, how are you doing this? How are you giving follow up and to give, uh, you know, like more information based on different areas. So um, it's just an industry that, like, you know, that this is something that is perpetuating itself, it's continuing on its own based on what happened through like the empowerment of these stewards, it continues. And then of course the Oaxacan fund where we said, well, let's look at who is already doing this in the territory from the beginning. Um, and it nourished itself from this process, from this program, from this new enthusiasm, and was able to then, you know, the people who were already working with that fund were able to like retake their strengths. Um, and then, you know, they also have their own communities of practice and where they meet once a month and share knowledge. And so we think it was also like something that was distinctive and that, you know, created these different ways of learning and sharing knowledge and continuing the process in the program. And so I think this really has to do with how we generate systemic change, how this type of project can perpetuate and sustain something structural And something else that we wanted to share that started happening and that came about from this change and is still happening is this idea of working on different levels. So the program started working really on like the personal level, and a lot of the activities and the methodology to be able to understand the more technical aspects of tourism had to do with how do you feel this on a personal level. And then it was worked on at the industry level, and at having this idea that like many industries don't have to see each other as competitors, but as allies and creating this identity. That's something that I think also just really propelled this change long term, and that it can move and cause changes, at different levels. Super. So just to close this idea of systemic change, and just like really leave it as this idea that like this isn't something that is like engineered that you can like create or like instill in a person. It's something that really was very organic, came about so naturally. And when we were looking at the results, we saw just these really clear manifestations of empowerment, of change in language, of questioning, curiosity, and so it's beautiful to also see the processes that can happen parallel to what you've designed and to what you're doing in the field. And so we went over more than we thought we would. I think that we got too excited by our topic of our findings. It was epic for us, but we did want to create a space for Q&A, of course, because if we're going to have a dialogue, yes, we want to first make sure that we answer any questions, anything directly related to the article or to what we have just shared. And so if anyone would like uh, to speak up or to write in the chat, you are more than welcome to do so now. Joanna, would you like to turn on your mic and ask your question? Hello, good evening. Thank you. Thank you for what you've been sharing. It's so nice to see you. Um, I was reading over the article. I haven't read it deeply, but from what you're sharing, what is the critical perspective? I still have that question. Do you want to take it on, Alejo, or do you want me to begin? You can if you'd like. So the critical position is in terms of in the beginning of the article, we give this general context of how these budgets are applied without going into directly signaling processes, because we didn't want to name names, but just expose patterns of how consultants are pressured to give results in a short period of time, how projects are designed without taking into account where they're going to happen, how these projects are designed from desks that are very far away from where it's going to take place. And also, we mentioned a little about this like the figure of the consultant, which we, is someone who's like very focused on like delivering not even results, but like in a report, and to charge money and to just move on to the next project versus like the role of the facilitator. And so our critique is a little bit in the introduction. And then of course there's points that specific to paisajes. We talked a lot about this convening, this gathering, because it hurts us to see how all of these resources are being moved. The facilitation team is ready, the consultants are ready, everything's been reserved, and there's no one there. Why? Because they never got involved, because the people who needed to participate didn't know about it. And so it brings to mind right now like these concrete cases. I don't know if you'd like to share anything else, Alejo. Yes, more so I think it sounded um like, talking about like planting the idea of how these programs function, how difficult it is to identify the impact that we want to create. And then without knowing well the territory, like what are the needs or what can happen, being more realistic. And then just like every conclusion that we brought in brings in its own questions, like the question about civil society and whether it's worth bringing in their participation. It's more about creating more questions and not just planting our findings. That's kind of the idea.
Yo empecé una cola en el chat y
Oh, I have stack. I have a list in the chat.
tengo a Ada y
Go ahead,
después a
Luis.
Alexa.
I see Adan and Alexa.
Ok, si Ada no tienes una pregunta, entonces vamos a Alexa.
Ada, if you don't have a question, then we'll go on to Alexa. No, we're asking for support to cause that change that we all want to bring about. Okay. Hello, good evening, everyone, especially Natia and Alejo. So nice to see you. So good to have read your words and now to listen to you. What beautiful reflections. I have the following question, not just to the article, but in what you presented as well. You mentioned a little bit this dilemma of the consultant who comes into a project with a lot of pressure, with evaluation tools and mediation tools that were already designed in some office. And that often, these people who are managing these are a little bit quantitative, right? This shows up also in your article, like the number of industries that participated, the number of women who participated, the number of experiences that were designed, what percentage of home sales was obtained. And so this really clashes with these like human factors that you mentioned, the empowerment of women, the strengthening of local identity, those things that are like really profound that they manage to work and reinforce in this project and in others. And so within these findings, these conclusions, how does these show up in final reports? Like what is the balance between what is achieved quantitatively and qualitatively? Like what role does that take in the final findings? That's an interesting question. Uh, Darla Basan is around here. She was the technical leader. And I think she shares a lot with she resonates a lot with what you're saying, probably. It has a lot to do with that link, that synergy that occurs between the facilitation team, the consultant team, and in this case, like the technical team of whoever is like leading the technical cooperation aspects. Because, well, there's reports that come, with their own way of showing results, but there's also a lot that is co-designed because of that link, through that link. And that's where the human piece can create that dialogue, right? And say like, this is what's being asked, but this is also valuable, and truly generate that dialogue from both parts so that also comes into the report. I think that's one of the functions of the consultant facilitator. And well, luckily there was a lot of opening in that situation as well. I don't know if Carla wants to share something, if she's listening, because also she had a lot of pressure from her side of like meeting these indicators, especially that there was going to be just if this was going to be causing systemic change, this is not something that can happen in 3 years. at this level of industry, this is delayed, right? Like you have to take things to a place where they can really connect. Um, but yes, there are many other things that the project accomplished and that cannot be measured or crystallized. Like, yes, like we wanted to include everything in the report, but this is a really good question. And I don't know, um, Tara, if you wanted to give a comment. Hi everyone. Hi Alejo. Hi Natalia. It's a pleasure really to be able to share this space. And well, just quickly, I'll introduce myself. My name is Carla Basan, and I was able to lead this part, right, to bring the groups forward, to expand their capacity. And I would just like to give a little bit of context, as Nati was saying. In this case, well, the project was called Paisajes Sostenibles, as has been mentioned already, which was happening in both states in the coast of Oaxaca and Chiapas. And well, it has three elements. One, which is very territorial based, the initial one, which is the management of the landscape. The second one was like management, the chains of value with the market, and then the financial sector. And I was working in the second element, and specifically in that chain of value, the value of tourism. And in that sense, the project already comes with an end product, which is something like the Bible for each project that is implemented in the territory, which is something that has already established indicators and goals that are very specific of what we need to accomplish from here to 5 years from now, which is the time that is used to implement these projects, right? So, in this sense, the indicators are really quantitative, as Alejo was mentioning. I think that that part still needs to be polished, right? To measure something that can be implemented with people and that are giving results. That sometimes, like, yes, how do we measure this? It's very important to accomplish that, a woman be president of a co-op. That's really important. And that's part of the achievements that the project seeks. And so it's important that it also has these environmental and social safeguards. That is that we try to implement every activity with this focus, right, of being sensitive to the activities that are being carried on, and making sure that women participate. And so we've seen that there are a lot of loopholes, a lot of gaps in terms of women's participation, and just understanding what was happening with women's participation. Um, and just as we mentioned, that women have this role of caregiver, that they have children, that they have to cover different spaces while the man goes and trains. And so something that we did from the point of like the people who were taking care of these safeguards was that she would say to us, like, if the woman who wants to participate wants to bring her children, then we need to cover the fees so that they have access to these trainings. And so that to me it was just something so basic, right? Something that needs to be visibilized. And so from there on, helping to close that gap. In my case, I was trying to see and be aware of like every organization. There were 8 organizations for Oaxaca and 2 for Chiapas. And so my role was sort of monitor who is coming to the course, what is preventing them from making it to the course. And so from that point of having that sensibility, being able to make the necessary arrangements with money to make sure that they could be in those spaces. And as I've already been mentioned, Carla, I'm sorry, I need to cut you off just because we already went over. So we want to make sure that we have time for breakout rooms. So thank you so much for this intervention. I think that what you have shared is really valuable, right? How these other indicators that are not on the book, but that make a market difference are things that we were able to see. So yes, we integrated them, but as Gaga said, we still have a lot of work to do in how we move from quantitative to qualitative. So if Luis allows me, I think we should go to breakouts because we have half an hour left. We're going to be working in groups of 3 people, 4 people. Well, thank you, Danny. Thank you for coming and listening. And we'll be in conversation later. The question that we're going to be working with is a little bit about what happens when these processes end. So what conditions should we generate through these projects so that the changes in the territories are sustainable? How many people do we have? Let's do 2 groups or 3.
Before we go ahead and do that, could
2 groups of what?
anyone who speaks English please indicate so we can make sure the rooms are bilingual, because the translation will not work in the bilingual room. So if you're an English speaker, please just indicate in the chat.
Thank you, Janique. It looks like everyone is maybe a Spanish speaker. Well, let's go to groups for 10 minutes.
The rooms are open, so if people could join. Right now, Fabian, just don't join our room. It should leave you in the main room.
Yo me voy a quedar con ella.
Yeah, it looks
I will
like
be staying with her.
that's okay. I'm I'm good. I'm good. Oh wow, it's 10 minutes. The breakout is 10 minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
No, for
Alright.
the most part, I think
Ajá. Son 2 grupos ahora mismo. Yeah.
Alejo, I think your mom is the only person who hasn't joined her room, but everyone else, yeah.
Okay. So I'm the only one that's the English speaker in the main room right now. Okay. Um, Montreal, Canada. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm the network. No, I'm the network director of Illuminate. Oh, that's my interest in the, and also part of the editorial collective that stewarded this collection of blogs. So that's my interest specifically. And it's asking me to confirm my language. Okay. I know, but it has like a screen that is asking me to confirm my language. So I'm just gonna do that so it could and I've also worked for more than 20 years in international development work specifically. So this was of interest in that way. Yeah. Well, I was thinking the question about the conditions that need to exist for this to be sustainable. Well, I do like the idea of the facilitator being much more like almost a stakeholder in and of themselves. So it's not just facilitating. I think that's what I understood from the presentation. That the facilitator is not there just to kind of facilitate a workshop, but more to facilitate a community process, to give voice. So yeah, I like I like that, and I'm just wondering if the term in English, which is facilitator, and the term in Spanish are the same. Yeah. Okay. Because it's facilitation, because I feel it's the role you described is much stronger than just what generally in English we understand as facilitation, like in terms of so I like that idea. But I also think, oh, mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Even if it's the same word, it might not have the same the same. Um, I don't I don't know. I mean, if you call it a community facilitator as opposed to just facilitation, maybe. I'm not sure. It was just that because I guess I don't have the word, and maybe if I studied with English, it's just that when I was listening to it, I realized that there was a different weight to the word, even though she was saying the translation in English was facilitation.
I think that might be interesting as well because Fabian and Louis, you're speaking from more of a North American perspective, but as somebody in the Caribbean, I understand facilitator in the same way that the Spanish is used, and we don't use Spanish in Jamaica at all. So it is interesting that it rings different to you, Fabian. Being somebody who is in a country that is in the global north, and even though I'm English speaking as well, being the more in the global south and interacting more with people along the lines of the global south, and in that way I understood it in the same way that the it was intended in the Spanish language. So that is an interesting point to think about as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but in terms of like when you leave the community and what conditions you need to leave behind, or how do you exit a community after you worked in it, and facilitate this process and facilitated this, how do you, so it's a question more than an answer for me, because even if you spend 3 years or 4 years and you really work and invest yourself in the community, when you leave the community physically onto the next project or the next town or the next area, it's hard to stay connected with that reality. You are moving on. So how do you set it up so that that's almost part of the work, right? Mhm. Mm.
And can we come back from the breakout rooms now, or do we need another couple minutes?
You have the capacity to give them do you have a capacity to give them a prompt, like a 4 minute prompt, or saying like it, because sometimes it interrupts them, to break their breakout room without warning them? Oh, they're here. So you,
Okay, the group is back.
There's still 3 people in the breakout rooms.
Yeah, there's no more people, yeah. Eh, Raúl, Ere. You're going to take the mic and share. I think it's going to be me because Raúl didn't have the best sound. So if you can, Ere, share with the group. Alexa, Juan. At some point it took me up, but we managed to talk about the importance of having someone. I call them a frontline person in contact with the community, someone who's integrated to the team, but also belongs to the place because that's a contact. And that's the most important thing at that point, having the most information and the person that knows the most about the place, but also with the tools and it's happening in your city. They don't all have they don't all feel comfortable dealing with the person who's, they don't know the needs of the place or the plans, and we still have we need trust also involved, and you can't always get that with people from the outside. So they will bring the importance of this information and the harvesting of the information. So let's say if somebody from the business or the community, someone key there, I don't know if you want to add something from what you discussed in your group. If not, we'll go to another, Alexa, Joanna. I think that what the other group is sharing at the end, what makes change sustainable is who stays. They sustain socially, and in that sense, one of the key conditions for the process, for the project, has to be intertwined with the people. And how are you going to develop key capabilities in that network of people to care for the place? So, allowing tourism to come in, but allowing that people to care. And another key condition is that anybody in that project needs to be able to help the people and be intertwined with the people. And on the other hand, faith becomes a common resource. You also need certain recognition of autonomy and a distribution of roles, and how fate does it. It's like self-governing, self-fulfilling. Thank you, Juan. Joa, Alexa, something you'd like to add? It helps a lot that wonderful facilitators that you shared should share their skills with the people who stay, and also integration to other learning communities, which you mentioned, which could be from the same community or project, or could go beyond that and join peer, so that they could continue dialogue. And it's not easy because it requires time and tenderness and kindness, but it would be amazing for sustainability. Yeah, excellent. Joe, anything else that your colleagues missed? I was also mentioning empowering the community also. I feel that facilitators at one point help and facilitate, but they're not going to stay there. So you need to train others. And so in any way, if the community is not interested or is not comfortable with the project, then the project is going to die. Once the facilitator leaves, the project will die. So it's really important to get the community involved. But I mean, in the real area where benefits are there, that interest needs to be sparked. Because even if you bring someone and you teach them everything, but if at the end of the day the community is not interested, it's not going to work. And that's really important, I think. Yeah, excellent. A great harvest, and also very aligned with ideas that we have shared after these processes with Natalia, and one precisely, we also mentioned it as one of the key results, which was this common goal coming from bottom up instead of up to bottom, and also to create facilitators in-house in the community to have them be the ones who carry out the processes. And it could be like a pre-project to identify these key actors and train them to be facilitators so that they can drive the project during the 3, 4, 5 years that the resource is there, so that then that way you would leave them with the communities in the territories, and it would actually maintain the life of that change. And that's the end, unless there are more questions. Or I am more disbelieving. It's hard for me, and that's why that's the question. Where, as a closing, so the article is not conclusive. It was hopefully the first of many discussions that will generate with respect to this, because it's been really hard to be dealing with processes with sustainable tourism in Mexico. They have required huge budgets in territories who cannot hold these processes. So I mentioned processes that have taken years and years and years in Oaxaca, with different resources from different operations. It's been foundations and other types of interventions, in addition to the biodiversity, and they're not sustainable. They right now, one of them is there's topics of social order, there's tourism issues. So I stay with that question about what you've been mentioning, and it's really valuable that you need to cultivate the community and get them involved and engaged, but also knowing that what we need to complement these processes and to be able to maintain them with so many resources without the need that a project has to go into another project and another project and another project, which is what we see in the Oaxaca coast. It's like one starts the other, and the other. International conservation was leaving and WWF was coming in. So how do you leave that question, like reflexive question, on the territories that I know here in Mexico? What are we not seeing to sustain sustainable tourism, and that conventional tourism is not advanced and destroying? What are we missing? So a little bit of reflection and concerns, and also to continue the dialogue, which is something I really like to do, to be able to imagine that what's missing so that we can manage to sustain it. And with that reflection, I'd like to close. I don't know if that provokes any comment, reaction from participants tonight. Anything you want to mention before we close? And our conversation is open through the article. You can leave comments. You can communicate with us. Thank you so much for reading us, for sharing this time in Thursday evening. So thank you for supporting us. I know these are not easy conversations, but like Alejo was saying at the beginning of the webinar, we never thought we were going to annoy as many people as we did, even though we went with a more objective form and lowered the things that we were putting in that article. And we feel that sustainable tourism requires critical production and literary creation. So we're on our way. Alejo, I don't know if you have anything else to add. No, I'm glad you shared that. Okay. Okay, we've reached the end of our webinar. For and this was the Oaxaca-Chiapas coast. Thank you so much for having been here tonight. It's been a pleasure. And I want to close. Alejo and Natalia, if you have any closing remarks, what are 2 ways in which we can support the work that you're doing or that you've done and you continue doing? Thank you, Luis. Thank you for your words. I'm glad you got into that reflection mode. Personally, I keep working in La Mano del Mono, which is an organization that's in charge of raising the hand and working with hard processes like this one. And I think that all this discussion and reflection that we've done tonight helps me a lot, precisely to have our work to be possible with change in our territory. And I think the best way to share is to make uncomfortable questions, share the article, read it, and also open these spaces to different actors. Maybe we're here now, but maybe what we really want, like not what we're missing, is made visible so that these projects really get changes and continue generating changes. And the more we discuss and talk about it and get closer to the designers, the better way we can implement projects possible. And these are things that conventional tourism shouldn't advance as quickly as us. And more than anything, we would also big value to any people that you might have. So I hope this is the beginning of many, many projects. I would like to add something. I'd like to support the cause. How you can support us. Something that impresses me in tourism in Latin America is the lack of professionalism. Very few people go to college and study the processes or come with from sociology, anthropology, or any other social studies. They usually come from business or engineering. And I feel that at this level, we need professionalism. The school that we did was closed from lack of students. Having a sustainable tourism master's in Mexico again would be better. Having, developing more professionals. In addition, when a tourist travels and it's a visitor, they're usually very contradictory. They want everything green and sustainable, but that means not taking a plane, but taking a bus or a train, or it costs a little more. So how can we be reflective when we're tourists, That's another way to support. Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Natalia Alejo, for your ideas and your work. For anybody who wants to keep on learning, I'm very happy to talk about several events by Illuminate. The next in Equitable Horizons will be May 6th, and it's called Deepening Local Roots to Transform Global Systems. You can find them at the Illuminate webpage, which I just put in the chat. And mark your calendars for the next participatory meeting, which will be May 17th. It's our next engagement activity. And you can check previous blogs in the series on the. So thank you to everyone for coming here to our webline, and I hope you have found valuable information and you can use them to make a better and more valuable and sustainable future. Thank you, everyone.